Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, welcome to the final session before Ramadan. We will take a break during Ramadan and then we'll be back after Ramadan. Uh, so tonight is really an important aspect in terms of understanding what we're doing in Ramadan. We have done one session trying to encourage us to make plans for Ramadan and really try to utilize the month. Tonight is about the mechanics of some of the do's and don'ts that we have to adhere to so that we are within what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for us. Usually these rules are called fiqh, and there's books written which detail these rules, which scholars have gleaned from the different ahadith and the ayats of the Quran and put together in a way to make it easy for the layman so they don't have to go do all the research. And so it's important for a layperson who's not a scholar or to have simple guidelines that will help them to be able to enjoy and follow Ramadan easily. I'll try to go a little bit quickly to leave some time at the end for questions. And so hopefully we can get through all the material with some time to spare at the end, inshallah. So the first thing is, what is fasting? As we learned the last time, it is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. And so it is the willful abstention from food, drink, water, and relations with your wife during the daylight hours, from sunrise to sunset, from dawn to sunset. And so when we eat in the morning, the suhoor meal, we will not eat or drink or do anything until after sunset. So that is what fasting means when we say we're fasting. This is a little bit different from the Jews and the Hindus and different other religions that say they fast, but then they are allowed to eat certain things and they are allowed to drink. And so the Muslims fast is probably the strictest and most difficult out of all the religions and the religious fast. So when you hear some other religions say they're fasting, don't assume that they're doing the same thing that we do. No, they have fasting where they can eat certain things and they can drink certain things as well. How to fast? First, you are required to make the intention each night for the fasting of the next day. So you can't make one intention for a whole month. You make each night, you intend to fast. And usually intention don't have to be verbalized. You have the intention to fast the next day. And then in the morning, you get up and eat a pre-dawn meal called a suhoor. This is a meal which it's recommended, but it's not compulsory. So if you don't want to eat anything, that's fine. You continue fasting as normal. If you wake up late, you can't say, well, I'll miss that fast for the day. You have to continue fasting if you wake up late and make sure that you set your clock for the next one so you don't get punished get a second time and make the same mistake. So get up when you eat a meal, and it's recommended that we eat something. And the doctors have many different recommendations of what kind of food you should eat that is a slow burner, will keep you full as long as possible, and all of that. After you eat the suhoor, then you have to be able to stay the whole day until sunset. When the sun sets, then we resume eating and drinking, and that completes your fast. This meal at the end of the day of fasting is known as iftar. As I said, the intention, you don't necessarily have to verbalize it, but if you want to do so, you can. For the night before, you say, بِصَوْمٍ غَدٍ نَوَيْتُ مِنْ شَهْرِ رَمَضَانَ. I intend to fast tomorrow in the month of Ramadan. If you forget to make the intention at night and you remember in the morning, you can say the other one, نَوَيْتُ بِصَوْمٍ الْيَوْمِ مِنْ شَهْرِ رَمَضَانَ. I intend to fast today in the month of Ramadan. Don't set a lot of store by it. As long as you have the intention, that is fine. Travelers, if you're traveling and you're taking the travelers, it's not compulsory for them to fast, but what they can't do is to make a next fast on the day of Ramadan. Ramadan fasting is for Ramadan. You can't make a nawafil fast in lieu of, okay, I'm traveling, I'm not fasting for Ramadan, I'm taking that concession, but then I'm going to fast and nawafil fast. No. Right, Ramadan fast takes precedence. And who is fasting compulsory on is also important to know if you are in that category. So if you are mentally alert, you don't have any mental health issues, you're sane, you don't have any of those, cognitive decline that don't allow you to function. Number two, you are an adult. Number three, you're healthy. Number four, you're Muslim. Fasting is not compulsory on non-Muslims. They don't believe in Islam in the first place. If you are not traveling, you're not menstruating, you're not having post-childbirth bleeding. So if you tick off all of these boxes, as yes, I'm saying I'm adult, I'm healthy, I'm Muslim, I'm not traveling, I'm not menstruating, I'm not having post, then fasting is compulsory at you. There are some reasons when fasting is not, when you don't, not compulsory, you're observing the fast. Number one, if you're traveling, then fasting is not compulsory for you. Allah has given a concession to the people who are traveling that they have to make it up back after. If you're pregnant woman, you know, she has to assess whether fasting could affect her pregnancy, and she may forego the fast, but she has to make it up back again when that situation is finished. If you find yourself sick, you are also given an exemption, mentioned in the Surah Al-Baqarah from the verse, 183 going down. Allah gives concession for the people who are sick, that they are allowed not to fast, but after you get well, you have to make up back for those fasts after Ramadan. Now, sickness is one of those things which is sometimes subjective. You know, what makes one person sick? What is enough? You have to judge your own intention. If you're just trying to trick, or you're just trying to, you have people they stump their toe and they say, "Oh my gosh, I can't fast. My toe is hurting," and stuff like that. You should try as best as you can. This is an opportunity, as we mentioned in the last class, that you don't want to miss. So you want to try hard to be able to be fasting during the month of Ramadan because of so many blessings you get. Breastfeeding, a mother who feels that this may cause harm to her baby and herself may elect not to fast. Right? Severe hunger and thirst. If you find that whilst you're fasting, you become so hungry that you're almost fainting with hunger and thirst, then you're allowed to break your fast, and then you have to make it up back after Ramadan. All right. Weakness or old age. There are some of us who are very weak and old, and fasting would be very unhealthy for them. It would affect their health tremendously, and so those persons, they are in a situation where even after Ramadan, they would not be able to still fast because they've reached the age of weakness where any kind of fast at any time would affect them. So in that case, in lieu of fasting, they have to give what is called a fidya, or a penalty, and they have to feed a poor person for each day of the month of Ramadan. Right? It's roughly about around 3 pounds of rice. It's, just feed a poor person a meal. Uh, Roughly, it's around, we calculate it normally around $10, $5 to $10. You have to pay that, or feed a person every day for the month of Ramadan. If you have a job that is very, very risky, you're working in the summer and you're doing roof work, and fasting would really affect you, then you are allowed to a concession of not fasting and then try to make it up back on a better day. An unconscious person, of course, is not expected to fast until they regain consciousness. And as I mentioned before, if you have your cognitive, if somebody have like Alzheimer's, or they have those degenerative diseases that their memory is shot and they can't process, they can't even remember if they're eating or drinking, or those kinds of persons, they have been given exemption to fast, but they still pay the fidya. There are some people who are exempted to fast. So these are people who have a reason not to fast. Then there are those who are definitely exempted. They get a break. The elderly who became ill due to fasting, the terminally ill person, the breastfeeding woman, the pregnant woman, those who first to work under harsh circumstances, the traveling person, the sick person. So these are their excuse of fasting. Now, for a fast to be valid, there are certain conditions that must be met. Number one, you must be Muslim, you must be free from menses and post-childbirth bleeding, and you must have the intention. These are the conditions that for your fast to be valid. Right? The conditions for the fast to be compulsory, you must be Muslim, be mature, sane, and healthy, which is a repetition of some of the things we mentioned. The third part, the compulsory part of the fasting, is to abstain from all kinds of food, all kinds of drinks, and relations with your wife. These are the three compulsory things. And you may say, well, that's in the definition, yes. But we are also, when in Ramadan we fast, we are asked by the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in hadith that you should also not be cursing, using foul language, you should not be, behavior and so on. But that don't break your fast if you curse, for example. It affects your iman, but not breaks your fast. These are the three things which breaks your fast if you get involved in them. The fourth parts of the fast, sorry. All kinds of food, to abstain from, all kinds of drink and sexual intercourse. Now, what breaks your fast before the approved time of breaking is if you intentionally eat or drink during the period when you are fasting for none of the valid reasons, like extreme hunger and thirst. You intentionally eat, that breaks the fast. Intentional vomiting, there's some difference of opinion about this, but intentional vomiting, it breaks the fast. Menses and post-bleeding, if that begins to happen whilst you're fasting, then that breaks the fast. And intentional ejaculation of sperm breaks the fast. So these are the things which will break your fast because they are violating the compulsory part of the fasting. Things that do not break the fast, and this is the one that is really important, and 90% of the questions we get usually from people, it's in this area, because everyone wants to make sure that they are not, going against whatever it is when they're fasting. So these are where most of the questions happen. Now, the thing to remember as a principle is if I'm not eating, I'm not drinking, and I'm not having relations, that's the three things. Anything else that does not mean eating or does not connote drinking or does not connote having relations will not break the fast, right? So that's an important principle. To take a bath doesn't affect any of the three forms, right? So that's perfectly fine. To apply oil to your hair, your body, decoration, to put on, perfume, to embrace one's wife, to swallow saliva or phlegm, like you have cold or something, you swallow it, does not break the fast. Now, because saliva is naturally made in your mouth, and it's not that you are actually eating the saliva or drinking the saliva. What is disliked is to try to bring up saliva a lot in your mouth, like you're very, very thirsty, and then you're trying to produce saliva and swallowing all the time. This is not encouraged, right? But swallowing your saliva, it's almost impossible not to. That don't break the fast. To inhale dust, from the environment, does not connote eating and drinking. To put water in the air, to vomit unintentionally, we mentioned to vomit intentionally breaks the fast. But if you vomit unintentionally, you just vomit because of something, you eat something bad for suhoor, and you vomited, that does not break your fast. You brush your teeth, does not break your fast. Right? You can even use toothbrush, toothpaste, and so on, as long because you're not swallowing anything, and you spit out everything. To clean your mouth, your nose. What is disliked is to keep putting water in your mouth and spitting it out all the time. This is not, encouraged. But you can clean your mouth. If you bleed, it does not break your fast because that's something coming from outside. From inside of you to outside. Pouring water in yourself and submerging yourself in water, like going in a pool or something like that, does not break the fast. And the Prophet ﷺ used to kiss his wives during the fasting, but you have to have control because you can't allow it to reach the level where you end up having intimate relations with your spouse. But you're allowed to show affection and you're allowed to kiss your spouse during Ramadan. whilst fasting. Any type of injection that you receive, as long as not contain nutrient, then that is allowed. It does not break your fast, okay? So you may get injection for different kinds of things, but as long as it does not provide nutrient, and of course, this is a fatwa, right? The most accepted position is it does not provide nutrient, then it's not going to break your fast. Giving blood does not break your fast. So those are some of the things that most of the questions get happened with. Now, what does not break the fast, but is disliked for us to do? For example, to taste food while cooking. We put a little bit in our tongue and then we spit it out. This is not something that is encouraged. To bite something in order to soften it for a baby, for example. To put water again and again in the mouth and the nose, and to constantly collect saliva and swallow it. So these does not break your fast, but it is not encouraged. Makruh means something that is disliked, but is not unlawful. Haram is unlawful. Now, should you miss any days of Ramadan, you have to make them up as soon as you can. You have literally from one Ramadan to the next to make them up. You don't necessarily have to make them up in order, and you don't have to make them up immediately after. You have a whole year. If you miss 3 fasts during the month of Ramadan for whatever reason, you fell sick or you were traveling, then you have a whole year to try to make up those 3 fasts. But I tell you, it is so hard after Ramadan to make up a fast compared to doing it during Ramadan, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to participate in fasting in Ramadan. So like the sisters, they're getting exemption from praying if they get their menses, but fasting, they have to make it up back. Allah wants to make sure everyone get to participate in this. So there's no way in which He's trying to allow people, except for the very old people who just can't fast. Allah is literally setting it up where everyone must, if you can't do it in Ramadan, or for some reason, you have to continue making them up. And so all missed fasts, for whatever reason during Ramadan, made up as soon as possible. As I mentioned, they're not consecutively. You don't have to prefix any date. You decide when you want to make them up, but at least before the next Ramadan. You can't observe mixed fast during Ramadan because then the obligation of the Ramadan fast takes that, right? And then each evening when you go to break fast, you can, again, make intention to break fast. You can make a dua. The usual dua people make, Allahumma laka sumtu wa ala rizkika aftar. Oh Allah, for you I have fasted, and with your provisions, I break the fast. So it's a small, short dua. People tend to make a long dua during the time of breaking fast, but really, you should hurry to break the fast. And so you make a short dua before you break the fast. Then we have, during the month of Ramadan, we mentioned about Laylatul Qadr. Most communities, masjid communities, will usually select one night in which they would invite the community to come out and participate as a group to catch the last 10 nights of Ramadan. So Laylatul Qadr, we mentioned the last time, is one of the last 10, it occurs in one of the last 10 nights of Ramadan. And many hadith also says the last 10 odd nights of Ramadan. So you're talking about 5 nights in which you're trying to catch it. To be very sure you catch it, you're trying to work on the last 10 nights of Ramadan, in which you're going to do extra prayer, extra ibadah, extra recitation. You do extra stuff so that you can be in that moment if that happens to be the night. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is prepared to give us 1,000 months of reward for that one night. So it's almost like 83 years of blessings. And so none of us should try to miss any of these last 10 nights. We don't know the exact night. All right. Literally, there was the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith mentioned that he did know, and then these two Muslims were fighting, and then Allah caused him to forget. So Allah wants us to look for it. There's a dua that is very famous that we make. Allahumma innaka afuun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anni. Fa'fu anni means me, and fa'fu anna means us. So you can say, you are the most forgiving, you love to pardon, so pardon. You can say my errors and sins, or you can say our errors and sins. Fa'fu anna, our, fa'fu anni, my errors and sins. And so this is a dua that you can make during this night. There is no formal worship procedure for Laylatul Qadr. So if you hear someone telling you that you have to make 100 Qul Huwallahu Ahad, or you have to say this 100 times and you have to do that and so on, none of these are from the authentic sources of Islam. And so there is no formal established worship which the Prophet ﷺ did or the companions. So don't get yourself where people say, well, you have to say, the Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, you have to say that 15 times and you have to do this and you have to do that. And no, right? So please don't get yourself tied up with that, in which you're following some ritual or recommended. Some scholars would usually recommend stuff, but this is not from, doesn't mean that it is what is established, right? So what we do, whatever worship that we can, we do. And so we did a previous class in which we mentioned some people are more inclined to pray 2 rakah nafil, like that's their comfort zone. There are other people who they feel comfortable when they're reciting the Quran. There are some other people who feel more comfortable when they're just making zikr. There are other people who are more comfortable when they're making dua to Allah. Each of us have a spiritual, psychic, innate likeness for one particular type of worship than the other. And so you will tend to want to do those more than the others, whatever is comfortable. But try to do a little bit of each. Some people, what they do, they every night of Laylatul Qadr, they put a little dollar, $2 or $5 in the box. So they are caught during that night giving some sadaqah. Then they recite Qul Huwallahu Ahad 3 times because it's equivalent to the blessings of the reciting the whole Quran. So they try to get that blessing. Then they make 2 rakah nafil or a couple of in twos, so they get the blessing of praying. And so they break up in a wide variety of ways. And then they sit and they make dua and ask Allah for whatever it is they desire in this world. And then you ask Allah to forgive you your sins. And so in this way, you have a wide variety of forms of remembrance and worship of Allah during the night of Laylatul Qadr. And as I said, the community would organize one night. Usually the 27th night is what communities do. My community does the 27th night. So a lot of people show up in the masjid during that night. And they will have food and they will make extra snacks and encourage people to stay late in the night. Some people stay over. Some masjids, they cater for whoever stay over. They'll give them suhoor in the morning. Encourage them to sleep in the masjid Sunday night, in worship and being there. So a lot of the masjids, they would have some arrangements like that. But you can do some at home and you can do some in the masjid. And then Taraweeh is Sunnah in status, and it is prayed after the Isha Salah during the month of Ramadan. It replaces Tahajjud. So the Taraweeh is the Tahajjud that you pray in the regular months. It's in Ramadan. It's made in Jama'ah. And so different masjids have different offerings. Some of them would pray 8, some would pray 20. I think in the Haram this year, they're praying 10. So it's in portions of 2, 2, 2, 2. And you can either go to the masjid and participate in that, or you could pray it at home as well. Salatul Witr, usually this is an individual prayer, but during the month of Ramadan, it's prayed collectively in the masjid. After the Taraweeh, they would pray the Witr prayer. The witr is either a prayer that can be 1 rakah or 3 rakah, depending upon which school of thought you follow. And then in the last 10 days and nights of Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ used to do something called itikaf, and that literally means to stick to something. So he would go and spend the last 10 days and nights of Ramadan in the masjid, right? And this is a practice which has become fard kifaya for the community, that they must have someone in the community who will do this on behalf of the rest of the community. If nobody does it, then the community is held accountable. And so usually 1 or 2 members from the community who has the wherewithal in terms of job, logistics, and all of that to be able to make a sacrifice of spending the last 10 days and nights in the masjid, they will usually come forward, and they would and the masjid would work with them and facilitate them by either providing suhoor in the morning for them and preparation for them to have a place to sleep in the night. So you would go sometime in the last 10 nights of the masjid of Ramadan, and you will see the masjid will cordon off a particular area with a kind of a blind, so blinds laid down, so like a privacy area, so that those who are staying for the last 10 days of night can have some privacy. And they will make arrangements for showers and all of that. A lot of the masjid, when they build them with showers so that you can, have showers if you spend the last 10 days and nights in Ramadan. And it's called itikaf. It begins before sunset on the 20th night of Ramadan, and then you go out on the last night, the Eid, the night of Eid. You go home, and then you prepare to come back for Eid day. Right? What do you do during itikaf? Basically, just what you're doing for Laylatul Qadr, making ibadah, contemplating your life, try to figure out how you can make your life better, worshiping, reciting the Quran, asking Allah to forgive you. So it's an extreme kind of exercise to really fix our relationship with Allah and perfect our worship and make us better people. Now, whilst you're in itikaf, there are certain things you're allowed to do: comb and cut your hair, clip your nail, clean your body, eat, drink, sleep in the masjid. You can go out if the masjid's bathroom is not connected to the masjid, you're allowed to go out and do that and come back. But basically, you're trying to stay in the masjid as much as possible, unless you have a very pressing reason of why you should leave the masjid. So you're basically secluding yourself in the masjid, right? Acts that void the itikaf: becoming a disbeliever, becoming drunk, having sexual relations, or leaving the masjid without valid reason. So now, one of the things in Ramadan that comes up is something called Sadqatul Fitr, which is on the day of Eid, and it can be given before Eid day as well. This is a charity that is obligated on every Muslim who can afford it, that they will give this sadaqah, so that this money will be taken and given to the poor Muslims on Eid day, so that they can have some food for their homes and take care of their children. And so it is not zakah, it is a different kind of charity specifically for Eid day, that allows the poor Muslims on Eid day to at least enjoy that day. So the money is distributed to those to buy clothes, to buy different things. So it's preferable if you can get to the people before the Eid, that is better. But you have until the Eid Salah in order to pay it. If you pay it after the Eid Salah, it's counted as regular sadaqah and not sadaqatul fitr. All right. So this is something that is very important. And usually in the time Prophet, it used to be given in rice and flour and not cash. Now we don't really give rice and flour to people. We give them cash. And so every masjid have to calculate what's the equivalent, roughly 3 kilograms of rice. And your masjid will determine how much you need to pay. And you have to pay for every member of your household. So if you have 5 members in your home, then you have to pay the Sadaqatul Fit for every single member. At Nur al Islam, I think this year, It's $10 for each person. So if you have 5 people living, you have to give $50, right? And then that money is taken by the masjid and distributed to the poor people so that they could have a good Eid. So that's some of the rules or regulations concerning fasting and Ramadan. We did want to mention just a couple of things for terms of zakah. Zakah is the third pillar of Islam, and it's a separate pillar. It has nothing to do with Ramadan, right? Why we mention zakah during Ramadan time is because most people give their zakah during the month of Ramadan, because Ramadan, the month of Ramadan, everything is enhanced in terms of blessings. 70 times or more blessings you get when you do an action during Ramadan. So a lot of people, in order to get that benefit, would pay their zakah in Ramadan rather than out of Ramadan, though there's nothing wrong to pay a zakah in any month of the year. Right? So it really has nothing to do with Ramadan per se. The only connection is that most Muslims want to pay during the month of Ramadan. And zakah is, we are not going into a long session today with this, just to give you something that's relevant. So if you're one of those who are going to pay your zakah during this month, zakah means to purify, to cause, to grow, to develop. So when you give zakah, Allah grows your wealth and He purifies your wealth. Two things happen to your wealth. And so it is obligation on us to pay zakah. It's not an option. And what it is after you have taken all your expenses out from the money that you save, that you have left as savings. If it is more than 3 ounces of gold, then you have to give 2.5% minimum from that. You can give up to 10%, but the minimum is 2.5% that you have to give to the poor. So you calculate each year, the money has a year has to pass over it. So from one year to the next, you take all your expenses out, and then what you left as savings, if it's more than 3 ounces of gold, then you take 2.5% of that and you give it away in charity. And there's specific heads in areas in which you have to give it. It's not given to anywhere. The Quran mentioned 8 categories of people who this money have to go to. The condition to make zakah compulsory on a person are as follows. They have to be a Muslim. They have to again to be of mental maturity, sane. They have to reach the age of maturity where they can discern and make decisions. They have to be free from debt. If you owe money, then you are going to receive zakah, not get zakah, not give zakah. Must be in possession of the 3.5 ounce gold, because you have to see if your savings come up to that, and anything, if it reaches that, then you have to give 2.5% of it. And the nisab must be in excess of one's legitimate need. In other words, it's your savings, not your earnings. And a year must pass over before it becomes liable. Conditions that make the payment of zakah valid. For it to be valid, you must be sane, mature, have the intention, give the zakah in the ownership of the recipient. So you can't ask for favors. Like when you go to give the money to the poor, you tell them, well, you owe me one, or I'm going to give you this money, but I want something back from you. I want you to return some favor. You can't do that. This money goes in the ownership of the recipient, and it's theirs completely without any condition. It's because it is your duty to do that. And to spend the zakah on the specified areas of expenditure, and these are mentioned in the Quran as well, and they are the poor, the indigent, the needy, the masakin, the fuqara, the people who collect zakah. Because if you imagine an Islamic state, and they have to go around to collect zakah from all the people, then they are allowed to receive a payment from the zakah collection for that service. To encourage new Muslims to Islam, you may, new Muslims just come into Islam and they don't have anything, you can give them some of the zakah to help them out. To free slaves, to help those in debt, to use for the sake of Allah, Usually, this was interpreted as people who go out in the battlefield and fight for the cause of Allah, that they can get access to some of the zakah money to help. And then to help the wayfarer, Islam is very big on people who are traveling, that you have to take care of them. You have an obligation to take care of them. So that's where the money of the zakah will be spent. We did have a class on zakah, which we went in a lot of great detail in some of these things. Those who are not allowed to receive your zakah are from among these 8 categories. For example, you might have a poor relative, right? You have to make sure my parents are poor, but they can't get zakah from me. My grandparents can't get zakah from me. And the reason is that you should be helping them with other than zakah. You have a duty already towards them to help them. You don't have to take this zakah money, which is for the poor, to help your relatives, your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents. You are supposed and obligated to help them already as part of your duty towards them. To your children, to your grandchildren, and others in the same line, they can't get zakah from you. A woman's husband, she can't give zakat to her husband, and her husband can't give to his wife, right? Other than these, you can give, so you have here, for example, brothers can give to sisters and so on. But your children and parents, that two line, you're supposed and obligated, and husband and wife, to already have given zakah. I mean, to help, part of your duty. You don't use the zakah money for that. And so these are some of the basic rules concerning Ramadan and zakah. I wanted to go fast to allow time for questions, or if anybody may have any comments to make. Most of the masjids will help you if you go to the imam, or in terms of, because some people in calculating their zakah, it's a very complex thing sometimes, because they have assets in all different forms and shape and so on. So the best place to go is to go to your imam and let him help you with trying to sort out your personal situation. Assalamu alaikum.